Hi, this is Marcus Benoit from Empire Radio Sounds. Today's featured artist, who currently lives in the Capital District, is Michael Dimin, an electric bass player, composer, teacher, author of The Chordal Approach and The Art of Solo Bass, and a sailboat enthusiast who sails both the lakes and rivers of New York State. I first met Michael in a local blues band we both were working in, the Donna Tritico Band, and got to enjoy his solid and imaginative bass playing in the context of the blues, funk, and rock music in that band. Like most of us working musicians, every night can be a different style of music, and after playing and hanging out with Donna's primarily blues band, I learned of Michael's jazz interest and work, especially his crusade to develop a chordal approach to playing electric bass, similar to the chordal solo style that Joe Pass developed many years ago. In recent months, Michael has been playing bass in a jazz duo, Staley and Dimin, as well as playing bass and writing music for MBST, a musical ensemble that celebrates music of the African diaspora. Information about this band can be found at www.mbst.com. Today we're going to learn about two of his songs from his CDs. There Are No Accidents, released in 2005 from the CD of the same name, and The Hunter from Michael's Big Droppin's CD, released in 2001.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Dimin. Welcome to Empire Radio Sounds. Glad to have you aboard tonight. I want to ask you a couple of questions about your CD, There Are No Accidents. And in particular, the first song of the same title, There Are No Accidents. Could you tell me what your musical influences, musical or otherwise, may be?
Yeah, it's interesting. You sent me these questions early, so I had some opportunity to think about them, and the music on this recording and the other one that I gave you called Big Droppins are heavily influenced, I think, by the music of the ECM record label.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Which is and as I look at it, I think that when we think about improvisational music, we tend to think of that the roots of that is in American classical music, aka the blues.
Okay, yeah.
But I think that, jazz, right, coming out of the blues. But I think there's another branch of jazz which kind of came out of Western classical music.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of that ECM kind of stuff. And I'm trying to remember when exactly it was that I first heard that. And I think it might have been Ralph Towner's Diary record.
Yeah. Yeah.
And two songs in particular, one Icarus, which was on that record and also on a Paul Winter Consort record. Yeah. And another song, The Silence of a Candle.
Okay.
Which on my YouTube channel, I have a really nice duet that I did with another bass player during COVID on that tune. But I think I have a degree in classical composition.
Okay.
And so I think my influences, growing up, I listened to the Beatles.
Sure. Didn't we all?
Then, yeah, right. And then, in 1976, I think there were two landmark albums, especially for bass players, right? One was Romantic Warrior by by
Chick Corea, right?
Chick Corea, right?
Yeah.
Forever. And the other was the Jaco Pastorius eponymous album, right? Jaco Pastorius. And although those were huge influences me on a bass player, I think compositionally I was really much more involved with, Bach and Bartok and kind of the classical composers.
Okay.
I think that's where those influences come, that kind of mixture of Western classical music with improvisation. I think I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does. It does very well. And this is kind of interesting because I did give you the questions in advance, but this is the first time I'm hearing the answers. And I find that interesting that, as you stated earlier in the answer, most of us come out of the blues tradition. I know I did, as far as jazz goes. And but I'm very aware of the ECM stuff and all. You know, the whole jazz scene was kind of exploding all through the late '70s into the '80s with a lot of different things. And so this is the first time I've encountered a musician who has really been influenced that heavily by ECM. So, well, that brings me to my next question. And has to do with when you title instrumental music, it can be difficult because we don't have lyrics, we don't have a hook. And I know when I write instrumental music, it's a struggle to come up with a title. So there are no accidents. Do you have a story behind that, or?
Um, I guess when it comes to naming instrumental songs, I'm not sure there's a lot behind it. It's a phrase that my wife always uses, or
Okay.
used to use, right?
Sure.
There, to explain what happens in life, right? There are no accidents. Everything has a cause, and an
Okay.
effect. And so, and when you're looking for money to make a CD, it's always good to honor your wife in some way, right?
Yes, sir. Sounds like a lot of wisdom right there to
There
me.
you go.
Okay, well, let me get to my next question, and this probably goes to your sailing experience, and that's the ostinato underneath this particular song. It's very, I don't want to say relentless in a bad way, but it's, it drives the music, the ostinato feel at least underneath this particular song. And so actually that's kind of my question is sailing, or what doesn't influence that particular
Well,
uh,
yeah, I think I want to separate those because I am an avid sailor, and sailing and music. When I sail and when I'm music are the only two times I never look or answer my cell phone.
okay.
Right? They are the parts of my life that allow me to commune with, I don't know if you want to call it a spirit world or a bigger world or the earth or whatever, but I get to be one um, with whatever I'm doing, and those are the two things that allow me to do it. And so, do they influence each other? Probably, but I think that kind of underpinning that ostinato. Well, first of all, that song was originally written as a solo bass piece with looping.
Okay.
Okay, and there
Okay.
is on that CD, the last piece is the solo piece. I also performed that piece in TEDx Albany, probably going back almost 10 years, which is also
Okay.
somewhere on YouTube. So by putting that kind of ostinato underneath it, it kind of gives us this layer, this pad that I can build off of. When I then brought it to the ensemble, I kept that same ostinato pattern. But going back to my love of Johann Sebastian Bach, there's that idea in the Baroque music of the continuo, right? The basso
Yes.
continuo,
Hmm.
that grounded base that everything is built upon. And so
Right.
that's kind of, there's even, the other song that we'll be talking about later is very much the same way. There's that kind of bass ostinato with
Yeah.
and then I kind of try to play with the harmonies on top, in a way that kind of hopefully would make Bach proud in his sense of voice leading. A
Sure.
little bit of a surprise.
Um, Michael, this CD is mixed very nicely, I have to tell you. And so, what I'm curious, when you are recording a CD and all the parts are done finally, and now you listen to the playbacks, what do you look for in a mix as far as what you consider a good?
I really want you. I think it comes back to bringing the musicians together, right? I bring together musicians who I trust, and I bring
Okay.
engineers who I trust and who know their work, right? Who know, when I recorded this record at NRS Studios, which is Scott Petito's studio down in Kingston, Catskill, Woodstock area, and he is such an expert and such a master at this that I really relied on him to kind of give me what I thought I needed. Um,
Okay.
I do like a very kind of non-processed, very flat sound. I don't like a lot of effects. I don't like a lot of that kind of smile curve that a lot of people EQ.
Yeah.
I like things to come out. I want the musicians to feel that what they played is being heard the way they played it.
Okay. And I
Right?
think that's fair.
So it's not really about me, but it's about the ensemble. And I
Yeah.
considered the engineer, who was Scott on this record, to be part of that process.
I think that's very wise, especially when it comes to jazz, you know, because it's, let's face it, some of the classic jazz things were just done really almost open air with two big mics, you know, the Blue Note stuff I'm thinking of back in the day. Well, that brings me to
Rudy Van Gelder stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They did in his living room. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things also that's such a challenge is that we don't know what people are listening to the music on.
Uh-huh.
You know, what's the quality of their stereo system? Are they
Good point.
Are they
Yes.
streaming it? Are they playing it through, you know, laptop speakers? Are they playing it on their phone speakers? And it's almost impossible to get a mix that's going to work for everything,
Right.
for every different kind of medium that's being played on, which is why I really want to rely on people who know that kind of stuff. Same thing with the musicians I play with. I didn't write out a lot of parts. I brought in musicians who I trusted and let them play.
Oh,
Especially
very
on this
interesting.
record.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, I have one more question before we're going to break away and listen to this song. And that is, it's like there's a musical conversation going on between the soloist on this particular, There Are No Accidents. You know, Eric's a wonderful soprano player. I mean, all your players are great. I know some of them. And as far as that conversation goes, again, if we're telling a story here, there are no accidents. Do we leave that to the ear of the beholder, or is there an intentional story perhaps you're trying to get across?
Yeah,
It's
there's
a
nothing
difficult
intentional.
question.
There was nothing intentional.
Oh, that's
You know, the subtitle for There Are No Accents is what you can do with a major scale, right?
I like it. I like it.
Because the melody is just a descending major scale. That's really all it is.
Yes. Yes.
And when we got into the studio, Eric started playing, and then all of a sudden Mark on guitar started kind of mimicking that behind.
Okay.
And that just happened spontaneous in the studio. And then the whole rest of the song was just Mark and Eric intertwining and playing off each other. And quite frankly, you're right, Eric's a great player. I think it was mostly Mark, though, who was the one listening and bringing it. And I think it might be on a different song. There's a part where there's a bass solo, and Mark is actually kind of playing off the bass solo later on in the tune, something he heard.
Yes.
Mark's just a brilliant guitar player. He's the director of jazz studies at SUNY New Paltz.
Okay.
Just a terrific player and a wonderful ear. And I went into that studio. I'd been listening to a lot of Charlie Hunter,
Okay.
guitar player.
Yeah.
And the sense that I got with Charlie Hunter, and I don't know if this is right or not, but that he just let the music flow.
Sure.
You know, there might have been a beginning, but there was definitely not an end. And so these songs didn't have an end. They had a structure, they had a melody, and then there was a lot of freedom in between.
Okay.
I think we might have only rehearsed once.
Really? Okay. That's excellent.
Yeah, and then just hit.
Cool.
Again, it comes back to taking musicians who I trust.
Well, you got some good ones there.
Yeah, I was lucky.
So, okay. Well, at this point, we're going to listen to the song. And okay, I'm just going to let the thing keep recording. I'll edit this part of the conversation.
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So what would happen at this point, Michael, is I would put, the song in and let it play. And while the song is playing, at some point, I will put information like who the players are, when it was recorded, and that sort of thing. And again, I'm going to run all this by you before I put anything out, see if you like it or not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pretend like we listen to the song, and we're going on to big drop-ins in the second part of this interview, as it were. Okay. And so here we go. So we're back with Michael Dimin, bass player, composer, sailor, among many things. This next song I'd like to talk about is called The Hunter, and this is from your Big Dropping CD. And again, I got to ask, well, where did this title come from, The Hunter?
Well, my son is named Hunter.
Okay.
So I named it after him. The music was really inspired by some pieces by a composer bass player, again, on the ECM record label named Eberhard Weber,
Oh, yes,
who,
yes. Yeah, yeah.
who kind of had that Jocko sound before Jocko did, right? That very, well, he played upright, so you get that fretless, electric, very melodic playing. And I was a huge fan of his, not only as a player, but as compositionally. And there's some things on his Seriously Deep record that that I don't want to say that I stole or that I mimicked, but it was just a strong influence as I created this song.
Oh, and, you know, as you were speaking about that style of bass playing, if you will, I was thinking, and the name's not coming to me, but the very first bass player that was in Weather Report, and well, it's a shame the name's not coming to me.
Alfonso
But,
Johnson or Miroslav?
I think it's, yeah, Miroslav.
Miroslav,
Okay. He had that sort of that melodic, well, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed. It caught my ear about Weather Report was that interplay of all the instruments, not just traditional roles, as it were, in Weather Report. But I digress. So let me get to my next question, and this is of interest to me. Oregon, they were pretty big in the all through the 70s, you know, nationally at least, if not internationally. So how did you make the connection with Paul McCandless, who was, I knew as an oboe English horn player extraordinaire?
Yeah, and I actually kind of was hoping he would play English horn on the piece.
Really?
He
I could see
kind of
why.
chose soprano. I mean,
Okay.
but I do like that soprano sound. It's very lyrical. It's very like a voice, like a singing voice. But I had played in a band with many, I think regional people might know, a woman named Betty McDonald.
Okay.
Betty was a big time DJ in the Woodstock on WDST.
Okay.
And she was also a jazz violinist.
Okay.
And when I was recording this album, I called up Betty and I said, "Hey, Betty, I'm looking for a sax player that kind of sounds like Paul McCandless. Can you recommend somebody?" And she just said, "Why don't you call him?" You know, and it's kind of a life lesson for me.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is he said no.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true.
So then it was to get his number, and so I called Michael Manring, who's been a friend of mine for many, many years. Wonderful, wonderful bassist. And you know, Michael lives out there in the Oakland, San Francisco area, so I thought he probably knew him. They probably played together, and he did. And he gave me his number. And I called him and I said, you know, "Hey, Paul, I'd like you to do 2 songs." And he said, he gave me a price and said, "Sure, send it to me." So how'd I get him? I paid him, right? But the really beautiful story was that, you know, for 30 years, as you know, I was a teacher, like you were a teacher.
Certainly.
And I worked with troubled girls.
Okay.
And Paul's late wife, Robin, worked with troubled boys. So when I would call and she would answer the phone, we would talk for like 2 hours about what we were doing
Sure.
in schools. And then finally she said, "Well, you probably called to talk to Paul, right?" Yeah,
After talking shop.
and actually there's a song on there, There Are No Accidents, called "Moving Forward," which is kind of dedicated to her after she passed.
I see. Well, that is a nice story to share. Before I forget, I would like to mention his McCandless, his approach on soprano to this song. It fits the title very well. I think the word I'm looking for is clarion, like a call, you know. But that's not a good example that I sang, but it really it's just out there. It does sound like a hunter, you know. It's very strong. Mm-hmm. But I could see where I would like English horn too. Either way, he'd have been great, and he was great on soprano.
The interesting thing about recording that song, if I may, is that you know, it's a very open song, very free.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Paul's in Oakland or San Francisco, right? So, and we're in New York, upstate New York, and so we recorded the song and we left a big spot open.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then we sent all the tapes to him. ADAT tapes at the time. He recorded his part and sent it back. And then I re-recorded a bass part so it would fill in, you know, any of the, you know, with a little bass solo, so it would kind of meld into it. So you'd never know that we were 3,000 miles apart.
You would not. You would not.
To it.
Now I'm going to have to listen again.
I mean, the option of flying him out here and putting him up and feeding him for a week was probably not going to happen.
Right.
And so
Well,
I'm so blessed to have gotten, somebody whose work I admire so very much
yeah,
on
yeah,
the record.
yeah. I can see why. Yeah. He, being a sax player myself, soprano saxophone is the hardest one to tackle. It is. It's just a bear to get it right. And in these two CDs, you got two great soprano players. Of course, I know Eric is a great tenor player, but and their styles are very different from each other. Paul McCandless and Eric Wolantovich. It's just wonderful. Both these players, which brings me to my next question: why you chose soprano for both these CDs in particular? Any reason or?
I think it goes back to all that ECM stuff that I used to listen to, whether it
Okay.
was McCandless, Jan Garbarek.
Yeah.
I just have this affinity for that range,
Sure.
that the lyricalness of that particular instrument.
Uh-huh.
When I saw you write this question, I was thinking, how would it have sounded with tenor? And I have a really hard time imagining that.
Yeah, well, you can always revisit the music, or somewhere up the road. I know it's just wonderful stuff. You got great players.
Thanks.
I want to ask you one other question while everybody looks at the top of my head here. Oh yes, are you composing anything right now for the future, in any context?
I wish that this kind of music. So Big Drop-ins came out in 2001.
Okay.
And There Are No Accents in 2005. And so there's been a bit of a hiatus, let's say. We've been through some family issues, some illnesses with my father and things, and kind of took me away from that. But I'm sorry to say that there just doesn't seem to be a real big market for this kind of music, for live performances. And that's really what you want to do, right? This is kind of music that just really breathes live. And to try to put a show together, and as you well know, we've talked about over bagels, that
yes, we have.
having a band and trying to rehearse a band and all that stuff is almost impossible these days, right? And when you're trying to do original music, so it's tough. I do play in a band that is original music. It's called MBST, EMBIESTI, which is kind of music, world music, kind of a funky groove. It's a lot of fun to play, and I write for that. I probably write about 30% of the music.
Okay.
But it's fun, but it's not where my heart is, necessarily. I love the songs, don't get me wrong. I love the songs. I love playing in the band, but it doesn't have that same kind of gravity that this other stuff has. And I think that's the way to put it. It's that gravity. But unless people are out there buying this stuff, it's hard to justify bringing the musicians in to do that, right? Recording's expensive, right? And I would love to do it, but I know there's a lot of home recording and all that kind of stuff, but when you plug your it was interesting. After I did There Are No Accidents, I was at the NAMM show in Los Angeles, and I got to meet George Demeter, who makes the Demeter preamp. And I went up to and I just shook his hand and I thanked him for making that preamp that made my bass sound so good on There Are No Accidents, right? But I don't have a Demeter preamp, right? I don't have the microphones and all the the really quality analog to digital converters. And if I can't do it that way, I don't think I want to do it.
I see. Well, Michael, thank you so much for giving up your time and your music and sharing it with me on my little pet project here, Empire Radio Sounds. We hope to launch this thing in January 2022, and I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to doing some more gigs with you sooner or later. At some point.
Yeah, it would be fun. That'd be fun. I've known about you for a long time, and it took us way too long to start playing together.
Yeah. Hi. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's Artist of the Month segment of Empire Radio Sounds with Michael Dimin. I hope to see you again next month with a new artist here on Empire Radio Sounds, a vlog dedicated to the musicians, composers, and singer-songwriters of the 518 area and beyond.